We're going to get started. If you take a minute to mute yourself, that would be great, just so we can all hear each other and hear the video. My name is John Linder. I am one of the co-chairs of Social Justice Action, which is the Social Justice Committee for St. Boniface. Connie and Liz, which in my screen are my left and right, are two of the folks that helped mastermind this and put this event on. This is our attempt. We had actually did this event, or tried to do this event last year at almost this exact same time, and we all went into lockdown. So to sort of coincide with the ban on plastic bags, we were going to do this as something similar, but we brought it back with a great new opportunity, which is the bill that's in Albany. Just a quick bit of housekeeping. We are recording this because we'll be putting it up so people can watch it. You can share it with your friends and other parishioners. Keep yourself muted. We will be doing showing this, a portion of the plastics problem, which is a PBS NewsHour production that they did talking about plastics. We'll watch about 40 minutes of it. And then we're going to have a presentation and conversation and Q&A with two leaders in our community on this issue. And so we're excited about that. Couple other quick things. When we get to the raising your hand function, there's several ways to do it on your computer. If you're on a desktop or laptop, you click on reactions, and then from there, there's a raise hand tool. If you are on a smartphone or a tablet, you have to click on more, or oftentimes the three little dots, and then from there you can raise hand. And if you're on your phone, if you dialed in, it's *9 to raise your hand. We'll be calling on folks. That way you can also share questions specifically to myself, Connie, or Liz that you'd like to ask of the speakers. I think that's all the big housekeeping things I have. Connie, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was everything, right?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, we're going to jump into the film. I'm actually going to be sharing my screen. So if there's a technical issue, raise your hand, and I'll try to we'll try to fix that. So. Sorry, that's weird. That's not the right screen.
This.
Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry. I had a different video screen was on top of it. I was like, why is it not showing? But there it is. Hold on.
The oceans are swimming in it. Rivers are choked with it. Coastlines are collecting it. Landfills are clogged with it. Our trash bags are filled with it. And it's even floating in the air we breathe.
Imagine spreading out 9 billion metric tons evenly. We could cover an area the size of Argentina or California 6 times over.
It's plastic, the material we can't seem to live without that also lasts longer than a lifetime. Plastic can take hundreds of years to break down, and even then, only into microparticles. It's hurting animals. It's in our food chain. Plastic is everywhere. For more than a year, my PBS NewsHour colleagues and I traveled far and wide, reporting on what experts call one of the largest environmental threats to our planet. In this special report, we go farther.
Plastic pollution is becoming a worldwide crisis.
And dig deeper. So how is that really helping the problem? To figure out if and how we can fix our plastic problem.
But I don't think we can keep on living and moving forward the way that we have.
I spent time with the Popa family in Toronto, Canada, who are in the middle of a plastic purge. Mom Vicky made a New Year's resolution to consume less and reuse more. She's now working to get the entire family on board.
Plastic gets into the ocean, and then fishies eat it, and then they get sick.
We're sort of telling our family and friends as well that we want to live this lifestyle. We're trying to reduce our impact on the planet. We're trying not to accept packaging and plastic and bring it into our household. And they do actually listen. And so I noticed a change.
But thousands of miles away from the Popa family, on one of the most remote islands in the world, the plastic problem is only getting worse. This is Easter Island, or Rapa Nui as locals call it. Sitting in the middle of the South Pacific, its closest neighbor is more than 1,000 miles away. All along the rocky coastline, chunks of plastic are easy to spot. Not so easy to spot, the microplastic hiding in the sand, as my NewsHour colleague Jeffrey Brown found.
This is microplastic, this is a rub, this is a plastic.
For cleanup crews here, it's a never-ending battle.
Maybe if clean all day, it's not possible.
Cleaning all day is not enough.
It's not enough because the center for the plastic is not here, it's there. It's terrific.
The trash is mostly coming from what's called the South Pacific Garbage Patch, an enormous swirling vortex of marine debris swept up in ocean currents and collected into a trash mass 1.5 times the size of Texas. That patch was discovered in 2017, 20 years after scientists discovered the Great Pacific Patch, 2 swirling masses of debris 3 times the size of France. On the shores of Easter Island, Ana Maria Gutierrez does what she can to organize beach cleans.
Es deprimente.
It's depressing because you find all kinds of plastics, from buoys to shoes, even car parts, everything. It's like a dump, but in the ocean. It just arrives. But the worst is that because the waves hit the coast, the bigger plastics get smaller and smaller, and it's very difficult to remove them because you have to move very big rocks along the coast and the trash just gets inserted in them, and it's becoming part of nature.
The world is trashing the ocean, and that trash, we're receiving it in our coast, in Rapa Nui. It's like someone putting a gun in your head and telling you, you must receive that.
Pedro Edmonds Paua is the longtime mayor of Hangaroa, Easter Island's one town. He says over the years, the plastic problem has only gotten worse.
It's coming from everywhere. It's too much. Every year is more and more.
And those tides of plastic aren't just a blight on the landscape, they're hurting wildlife around the world. According to one study, if current production trends continue, by the year 2050, there will be more plastic than fish in our oceans.
When they come up into the net.
In Costa Rica, my colleague John Yang learned how plastic affects an already endangered species.
This is stuff you've just picked up on the beach.
I literally just found this here. Yeah, this is a really clean beach. Plastic gets into the marine environment. It breaks down into tiny little pieces called microplastics, and anything that eats in the ocean will inadvertently lead to plastic. That's killing turtles. Up in Florida, they've got a hospital now where when a turtle comes in, they no longer say, does the turtle have plastic in its belly? They now say how much plastic is in the turtle.
Oh my God.
In 2015, a marine biologist's video went viral, documenting the painful process as she removed a plastic straw stuck in a sea turtle's nose.
Oh man.
What happens is the turtle comes up to breathe and inhales the straw, and then they get lodged in their faces. And this is becoming more and more common. It's not a one-off anymore.
In the Philippines, a whale washed ashore in 2019 with nearly 90 pounds of plastic in its stomach. Seals are getting caught in fishing nets made out of plastic. They're called ghost nets, abandoned by the fishing industry, and an estimated 640,000 tons of them are floating in the ocean. That's 10% of all known ocean plastic. And it's not just turtles and seals that are at risk. Scientists say nearly every seabird now eats plastic trash, mistaking it for fish. Even here, the Mariana Trench, in the deepest part of the ocean, plastic has found its way more than 6.5 miles down. Oceans get a lot of attention, but experts say the problem is much bigger than that, including here, the largest freshwater system in the world. On the shores of Lake Ontario, one of the 5 Great Lakes, we combed the water's edge for plastic with ecologist Chelsea Rockman.
Here's some plastic, here's some plastic, here's some plastic. You don't have to look very hard to find it.
On some beaches, we found big chunks of plastic. Along another part of the shore, microplastics.
The thing that sticks out to me the most here are all of these kind of perfectly spherical little pellets.
Yeah, what are those? I noticed those too. They're different colors, right?
Yeah, they're different colors. These are pre-production pellets. There's a lot of plastic production facilities just north of here and in Toronto in general. And so what we see here is basically spillage. These things are lightweight. They make a ton of them. When they're moving them around on the shipping dock or in the facility or transporting them, they blow away easily. They can end up spilling on the dock. They go down the drain and they end up here. Okay, so this is all rinsed out now.
Rockman uses a sieve to collect samples of the microplastics, then takes them to her lab to study their makeup.
What happens is over time, the sun degrades the bigger things into smaller and smaller pieces. So this is like one stage in the breaking down. And then if we look in here, you can see some bits of fragments that aren't perfect pellets, you know, that are further down the process. So they just break down smaller and smaller and smaller until you have a greater quantity of smaller pieces of plastic.
But the point is they never go away.
Yeah, like, you know, never is a strong word, but the rate at which they break down is incredibly slow. So every piece of plastic that's ever been produced, unless there's something we don't understand yet, is likely still here today in some form.
Rockman began her career studying the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, but a move to teach at the University of Toronto put the Great Lakes in her backyard.
So when you think about the ocean, it's this dilute body of water. The oceans are vast. Lakes, while this is vast, are quite small in comparison. Cities surrounding it are bringing trash into the lake, and it's concentrating in there and not diluting into a different location, at least not at any pace, you know, we can understand.
So does that mean that the plastic in a lake is more damaging to the environment?
We sample fish from the ocean. We might find plastic in 1 in 4 fish, 1 in 10 fish. Here, my students sample fish from this lake. They find it in every single fish that they sample.
Every single fish?
Every single
coming from
fish
this
that
lake.
we sample from Lake Ontario has at least one piece of microplastic in its stomach, which to me shocks me, right? And I've been researching this for more than 10 years.
And that means fish aren't the only ones eating plastic. If humans are eating fish, are we ingesting plastic too? Part of Rockman's research is trying to answer that by looking inside the fish.
We know there's plastic in the water.
Yes.
We know that the fish eat the plastic.
Yes.
We have no idea if when we eat the fish, we're also eating plastic. And how much do we know about what effect it has on us? So on humans, we know very little. There are some researchers starting to get into this field. That's something we're trying to understand in our lab is how does plastic move through a food web? Is it just staying in the gut content of animals and I'm only exposed when I eat the gut, like an oyster or mussel? Or is it transferring out of the gut into other parts of the body and actually moving up the food chain the way like a chemical contaminant does? So we're still trying to kind of understand that part. Black. So can I ask you, knowing what you know now, do you still eat fish?
I do eat fish.
You do.
I do because we still don't know a ton of information about the health effects. The other reason I still eat fish is because yes, they eat plastic, but like I know it's in my drinking water and I know it's in the air, like in the dust. So if I eat a piece of fish, it's not that different.
So plastic is in the fish. It's at the bottom of the ocean. It's even on your plate. Where isn't it? Look, more than 9 billion metric tons of plastic have been produced since 1950. That's the weight equivalent of 27,000 Empire State Buildings or more than 1 billion elephants. So when and how did our addiction to plastic first begin?
What can be made with plastics? Cosmetic containers and cockpit housing.
Plastic was a new material that transformed the consumer landscape. When large-scale production began after World War II, the potential for growth seemed unlimited.
This paratrooper floating down to welcome Mother Earth is depending on plastics to get him there safely.
The durable material did and does make some aspects of life safer.
They take better care of little cuts and scratches.
Not to mention more convenient. And ultimately, over decades of use, a disposable way of living evolved.
It's time and light.
Its future was so limitless that by 1967, Dustin Hoffman received this career advice in the film The Graduate.
I just want to say one word to you. Just one word. Yes, sir. Are you listening? Yes, sir, yeah. Plastics. Exactly how do you mean? There's a great future in plastics. Think about it.
Plastic has revolutionized the medical field. Disposable syringes help reduce disease transmission. Prosthetic limbs make life easier and more comfortable for amputees. In grocery stores, plastic helps reduce food waste by keeping foods fresher. And don't forget, mobile phones have many plastic parts. Over time, the global appetite for plastic has only grown.
It's very cheap to produce. It's very, very useful, very versatile. So we just make a lot of it.
Okay. Roland Geyer at the University of California, Santa Barbara is an industrial ecologist who quantified the problem. He says of all the plastic, an estimated 60% still exists on Earth today.
Of the 9 billion metric tons that humankind ever produced, maybe 20 to 30% is still in use, and the rest, so that's about 6.5 billion metric tons, has become waste.
And it's ended up in landfills.
Ended up either in landfills, in the environment. A tiny fraction was recycled, and then an equally small fraction was incinerated.
In 1950, world production of plastic was a mere 2 million tons a year. Since then, annual production of plastic has increased by nearly 200 times, jumping to 350 million tons a year.
Now we produce more plastic than most man-made materials. Every year we make 6 times more plastic than aluminum. We make 20 times more plastic than copper. And even metals corrode and erode, so they would eventually sort of go back to the natural environment. Plastic just stays plastic.
So all the reasons we like it and value it and want to use it, those are all the reasons that make it more difficult to get rid of.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, some of these wonderful properties, that it's so durable, becomes a problem when we are trying to get rid of it. Then suddenly we don't like the fact that it's so durable.
As our dependence on this durable new material has grown, so have the piles of stuff in our landfills. But it hasn't always been like this. Americans were at one time very good at saving and reusing materials. In colonial times, the motto was waste not, want not. During the Great Depression, use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. In the throes of World War II, the US government ran campaigns to get citizens to save and reuse everything from scrap metal to rubber, gasoline, paper, and even animal fat.
People who buy in large quantities and truck it away in their cars.
And then came the economic boom years, coinciding with the rise of plastic.
It's the crystal clear plastic that lets you see everything you wrap.
And disposable lifestyles became fashionable.
Rings like magic.
It was even featured in Life magazine in 1955 with the celebratory headline, Throw Away Living.
Daddy, you forgot. Every litter gets hurt.
Also in the 1950s, the formation of the Keep America Beautiful Coalition. Using public service announcements starring a Susie Spotless character, the coalition aimed to get people thinking about their responsibility to stop pollution.
Please, please, don't be a litter, but cause every litter gets hurt.
Decades later, in 1971, it was a Keep America Beautiful ad that shook the American conscience.
People start pollution. People can stop it.
The Keep America Beautiful Coalition was founded and funded in large part by the beverage and packaging industries, the same companies producing much of America's plastic. Since that campaign, we, the American people, have been sorting, weeding out, and sorting some more, all with a certain sense of responsibility. Every day, an estimated 750 tons of material flow through this process. And every step along the way, just like this one, is designed to remove one more material. For an ultra-durable material like plastic, the goal of this system was to get us to use less by reusing what we'd already made. But that requires people buy into and participate in the system.
The global recycling rate, we estimate as 9%. So it's very, very poor. And it hasn't even improved all that much. The current recycling rate in the US is barely 10%. But even in Europe, it's like 30%. I would say that the way we recycle plastic at the moment is not part of the solution. I would even go as far as saying it's part of the problem.
Recycling is part of the problem. Why is that?
So even recycled material, you can't cycle it forever. Eventually, you have to dispose of it. So the only way to reduce disposal is make less plastic, and that's the only benefit of recycling.
One reason, the sheer volume of waste created around the world. Americans alone create 4.5 pounds of trash per person per day. As a country, we generate 1/3 of all waste in the world. In a best case scenario, we'd recycle as much of that as possible. My colleague Paul Salman met a woman in Massachusetts who is a recycling superstar.
This is 2 weeks worth of trash.
That's 2 weeks.
And plastics, these are flower sleeves. I try always to tell them I don't need a flower sleeve when you buy flowers, but sometimes I'm not quick enough. Like compost tea bags, so this is the string, and because it has a staple, so it shouldn't go into the compost.
Really?
The tea bags, yes, I'm very anal about this.
So are you kind of a recycling fanatic?
I wish there was a word like OCD for recycling.
Not everyone is as vigilant as Meera Singh.
People today don't understand what happens to their trash or their recyclables. They put it out at the curb, a truck comes along, throws it in the back, and it disappears. And they don't have to ever think about it again. 460 tons again today. Yesterday. Oh, man.
Ben Harvey runs a recycling plant just outside of Boston.
When we collect it, we've got to think about where are we going to go to dispose of that material? Was it going to go to a landfill? Is it going to go to waste to energy?
The process is more complicated than simply dropping a bottle into the right bin. There are 7 types of plastic, and not every type can be reused.
The plastics that we see come through here, even though they've got the little recycling logo on the bottom of it, that doesn't mean that there's a market for that material that we can recycle that.
For a long time, Harvey sent Boston's plastic to China. Until 2018, it had the corner on the market. And that's where many recycling facilities in the US sent their plastic to. Greg Cooper leads recycling efforts for the state of Massachusetts.
About 20, 30 years ago, when we were starting to ramp up our recycling programs across the country, I think China saw an opportunity to utilize some of the materials, the raw materials and the commodities that we were producing through recycling.
But environmental protection and a reputation makeover put an end to that. In March of 2018, China stopped buying plastic recyclables completely in an operation dubbed National Sword, refusing to be the world's dumping ground.
Right now, we're not moving any material to China. Very difficult to move into China right now.
So all that material started stacking up in Mark Gallardi's Save That Stuff warehouse.
Inventory is a little high. It does come in waves because we do have to sell multiple loads at a time. So when we get a shipment, we'll ship out 3 or 4 loads. So we're trying to do price adjustments, and that's why it's really hurting our bottom line. We can't do the adjustments quick enough to keep up with the changing markets.
With prices for plastic tanking and global markets shifting, as much as half of America's plastic waste was and is stuck in the US, stockpiled in warehouses, disposed of in landfills, or incinerated. And the plastic that was still being shipped overseas started flowing to new countries, this time in Southeast Asia. Malaysia quickly took up the mantle as the world's leading importer of plastic scrap. Here in Ipoh, that meant mountains of plastic piled up at the edge of the jungle as plastic waste inundated recycling plants.
We are standing here next to a pile of about 1,500 tons.
This Malaysian site is run by Pavel Chek with a government license. Here, the plastic waste goes into a kiln to help in the production of cement.
The first waste started coming here mid last year, and that was the time of the boom of the imports.
Since then, the piles of plastic waste have shrunk, but the proportion of plastic waste coming from Western nations hasn't.
Here you have post-consumer cake or pancake from Germany. Just can you make anything out of that? Yeah, USDA organic. So here you have some organic American vegetable packaging. Here we have a Pepsi bottle with no local printing.
Czech sees real value in the global trade in recyclable commodities but not in plastic scrap.
Mixed waste, non-recyclable waste definitely should not be traded. It has to be a product. It has to be raw material, but it must not be a mixed non-recyclable liability of one country to be passed on to another country. Because then you see the greed, then you see that for money people are ready to do bad things.
Check site is legal, but illegal sites like this one we secretly filmed have been popping up all over the country as the opportunity to turn a profit grows. One way to get rid of the plastic waste? Burn it. That illegal activity spurred citizen activists to take action. They used drones to find the worst offenders, then lobbied the government for change. As the influx of plastic waste grew, the Prime Minister took notice.
We cannot accept that kind of idea that waste from rich countries should be sent to poor countries. We don't need your waste because our own waste is enough to give us problems.
Before long, in October of 2018, Malaysia, like China before it, banned new imports of plastic waste. Malaysian officials turned away arriving shipping containers filled with plastic from Western nations that were being smuggled in, destined for illegal sites. In front of a crowd of media, the Malaysian Environment Minister showed off what was inside.
Whoever that sent their waste to Malaysia, whether it's e-waste, whether it's plastic waste or whatever waste, we will send it back. And we will fight back. Even though we are a small country, we cannot be bullied by developed countries.
The crackdown had the unintended effect of pushing illegal sites into more unpopulated areas, away from the eyes of law enforcement. And now plastic waste smugglers are taking their business away from the cities and deeper into the jungle. The burning sends a toxic brew into the air. Sunny Neo is an activist working to stop the illegal activity. He uses a particle counter to take air quality readings. Anything over 35.4 is considered unhealthy. Here, the reading settled at 123.
These people are doing in complete defiance of the government and polluting the environment, doing things that are harmful to our society.
We found that harm across the country. Outside the northern city of Sungai Petani, yellow tape and a government notice to shut down. The facility was still operating 5 months later. Farther south in Port Klang, an illegal facility now abandoned, but still filled with foreign waste, including plastic from America. Plastic has become a hot potato. In Indonesia, they're shipping containers full of waste back to Australia. In Thailand, activists are taking to the streets to protest the trash trade. The trade that's polluted their once pristine beaches, largely with what's known as single-use plastic, the stuff that's used once, then tossed.
40% of all plastic is that kind of single-use packaging.
40% of all plastic.
Yeah. So if we did away with single-use packaging, I think we could solve 40% of the problem.
That would make a huge difference.
That would make a huge difference, and I think it's really doable.
So bans on single-use plastic are popping up around the globe. From the tiny island of Dominica in the Caribbean, where they've banned all single-use plastic containers, including styrofoam, to Scotland, where one of the targets is the cotton swab, to Rwanda, where one of the world's first plastic bag bans has transformed the landscape. That willingness to crack down on plastic use is not as widespread in the United States. A PBS NewsHour Marist poll found that only 25% of Americans would fully support a ban on single-use plastics, and 19% somewhat support the idea. In some places, the backlash on bans has been loud. The pressure from public outcry has led some cities and states to reverse course and ban any bans on bags and straws. In Oklahoma, the state government passed legislation preventing local governments from banning or taxing plastic bags. The targeting of the tiny straw even drew the attention of President Trump.
So you have a little straw, but what about the plates, the wrappers, and everything else that are much bigger, and they're made of the same material? So the straws are interesting. Everybody focuses on the straws. There's a lot of other things to focus.
In all, more than a dozen states have implemented these preemption laws to keep local leaders from passing any bans on plastic. Already, hundreds of states, counties, and cities have some kind of plastic ban or tax in place. Seattle is one of those cities. It set its sights on single-use utensils, bags, and straws in July of 2018, becoming the first major American city to implement an outright ban. Why straws?
Not all plastics are created equal.
As Becca Fong of Seattle Public Utilities explains, even the best recycling system isn't perfect.
It's geared to capture certain types of plastics of certain sizes. And if it doesn't fit into those categories, it's not really recoverable.
So speaking of certain sizes, something like this, a tiny little plastic straw. Where does something like that straw fit?
The fact that it made it here is pretty impressive, but the vast majority of small items are going to fall through the machinery and not be able to be recovered to be recycled.
More important than the ban itself is the way in which it makes people think about the way they use plastic.
It is that piece of material that is so small and so nuanced and actually kind of an extra for a lot of people, that it actually makes people stop and think, do I really need to have this straw? And that's probably the bigger impact.
A straw that I use today in Seattle can end up in the Pacific Ocean and last there for thousands of years. Or it can return back to your plate in 10 years as microplastics embedded in some fish.
Mami Hara runs Seattle Public Utilities. Before her team could implement and enforce the ban, they had to get local businesses on board.
For a lot of businesses, it hasn't been a hard sell. For those who are concerned about the price point, we try to work with them to find viable alternatives that don't impact their purse too much.
We'll buy about 1 million straws this year, and the cost of straws has tripled.
Bob Donegan is the president of Ivers, an 80-year-old Seattle seafood institution.
We don't routinely put a straw in a drink. We ask everybody, would you like a straw? And they can always have one. And these are the new compostable straws. They are made from plants.
But the compostable straws aren't a perfect solution.
I challenge you to suck a milkshake through that straw and see if you can make it.
That's not easy.
It's pretty hard.
Yeah.
So he's spending more money and ordering bigger straws. Since the ban, costs have gone up, but Donegan says he's budgeted around them by buying supplies early and in bulk. So there's no use, he says, in complaining.
Put on your big boy pants and get used to it. Everything the government does isn't fair, but our customers expect it of us, and we want to do what our customers want.
Not only are we saying that the environment is important to us, this is a way for us to put our money where our mouth is.
Wes Benson at Taco Time, another area food chain, is taking Seattle's straw and utensil ban one step further. Today, nearly every single item they give customers, from utensils and cups to plates and bowls, is fully compostable, meaning they're made of natural materials and can be turned into compost after being tossed.
One of the nice things about being 100% compostable is you can make it a part of your story. We're a local company. The environment is important to us, and we're willing to pay 5 times as much for our packaging.
What's important to remember about compost, the waste has to actually make it to a compost facility in order to break down into soil. Most compost facilities in the US only take yard trimmings, but here in Seattle, they have a system in place that includes food waste. This is where Seattle processes its compost on an industrial scale. A family business run by Jason Lentz, an hour north of the city.
How much of a problem do plastics present?
You know, it's not insurmountable. At the same time, it's definitely a problem.
Even here, bits of plastic need to be sorted out. Lentz has been in this business since 2008.
So without the city asking this of you or showing that there was a demand for this, you guys likely wouldn't be doing this.
That's correct. Seattle is a big pusher of organics diversion for composting. And so that's why we're in this business.
Where are we going next?
Lentz's company now churns out hundreds of thousands of tons of compost a year.
I think that's the spot over here. This is the final product.
And sells it to everyone, from soil companies to local governments to home gardeners. Seattle's efforts even extend to the ballpark. Behind the scenes of Major League Baseball Seattle Mariners, we got a look at the stacks of compostable items they now require food vendors to use. In 2017, the park managed to recycle or compost 96% of all waste. Trevor Gooby runs operations at the ballpark.
It definitely is more work to sort through the trash that we have after the game and to do these type of things. Again, we feel it's really important for our business, and it's important because our fans are asking us to do it.
So while some cities and businesses in the U.S. are doing their part to cut back on plastic, here, the entire country is being asked to pitch in. Canada, the world's second largest nation, is trying to put into place the world's toughest plastic ban.
As early as 2021, Canada will ban harmful single-use plastics from coast to coast to coast. It will be up to businesses to take responsibility for the plastics they're manufacturing and putting out into the world.
At Unboxed Market on Toronto's historic Dundas Street, single-use plastic is already a thing of the past. The zero-waste grocery store is the brainchild of Michelle Gentner and her partner, Luis Martins.
I'm from rural southern Ontario and he's from southern Portugal. It was very much a need to recognize access to food and quality ingredients and things that are always fresh. And when you grow up near or on farms, you have constant contact with those items. So you can touch your potatoes, you can touch your corn, you can see it, you can smell it. And with everything that's happening in the environment right now, that excess packaging and plastics and single-use wrappers and everything just seemed daunting. And so we wanted to avoid it as much as humanly possible.
Shoppers here bring their own containers to transport everything home.
Somebody in the winter had a glove and they put eggs in each of the fingers of the glove so that they wouldn't bang together. However you like.
They put eggs into a glove.
Into the glove. Yeah, it was amazing.
So milk.
Milk.
You go through so much milk in my house.
Yes.
How do I get milk here?
Milk is a fun thing for a lot of people. It's on tap as well. So if you didn't bring a container, you can grab one that we have. Same process always.
Yep.
Any size. Yep. So just open that. And then there's a little spout underneath here. So just line your jar up. Yep. And then just pull it slowly on the handle.
Oh, and fresh milk. All right. But even here, to help keep some food fresh, they rely on plastic. Now, can I ask you about one thing?
Yeah.
Obviously, these are made of plastic.
Yes.
So you've got plastic in the store,
We
right?
do. We do. It's deliberately single-use plastics that we're trying to avoid. These will be used, have been used countless times, will continue to be used countless times. It's not the same as a throwaway wrapper around a straw or a chip bag or those individual single-use products. This is meant to be a sustainable long-term product.
Unlike in the US, people here seem to be more on board with cutting back on single-use plastic. Polling shows 81% of Canadians support the idea of a ban, and a majority would also be willing to pay more to help reduce waste.
When the scale of the problem is so big, though, this is what we hear again and again from people who are trying to make a difference.
Yeah.
How do you even think about it day in and day out?
It's all I think about. It's all I think about all day. I think that there is an overwhelming, this is a lot, we can't do it. But what I say to customers who come for the first time and they're trying to think of a way to transition in their own environment, don't look at your whole house. Look at one room. Look at one section of your room.
Broccoli? Yeah, can you help me put in the fridge, Alex?
Vicky Popa shops at Unboxed Market every week in her quest to banish single-use plastic.
I think we don't have a choice to not do something. I think we know the problem's there and we may not be able to reverse what's been done, but I don't think we can keep on living and moving forward the way that we have. Do I think we're making a difference? In some ways, yes. As a family, we are making a difference. I think the biggest impact we could have is to pass it on to our kids.
6-year-old Bella has been paying attention.
Is plastic a big problem in the ocean?
Yes.
Why is it a problem?
Because the animals eat it and then they get sick.
Do you think that most people know about this?
No.
No, why don't they know about it?
Because they don't really think about the planet.
Why should we think about the planet?
So it could stay healthy and then all the animals could be healthy and then all the animals could be in the ocean.
Canadians might support a plastic ban, but what about companies? Under the government's proposal, companies would be responsible for the plastic long after they make it and sell it. Unilever is a global company with dozens of recognizable household brands. Dove shampoo, Lipton tea, Vaseline, and many are packaged and sold in some form of plastic. Unilever not only signed the New Plastics Economy Global Commitment, an initiative from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation targeting plastic pollution at its source, it also just pledged to cut in half the amount of non-recycled plastic it uses by 2025. Its annual plastic packaging output is nearly 700,000 metric tons.
We are not going to do away with plastic. It is in too much of too many things that we have in this world, well beyond any packaging that I put in the marketplaces.
John Coyne works on sustainability issues at Unilever Canada.
What I think we need to try to do is try to apply ourselves to the waste issue. How do we take recycling rates from 11% to a much higher number?
By saying it's more of a plastic waste problem instead of a plastic problem, aren't you really just shifting a lot of the burden more to the people who are using the plastic instead of the people like Unilever who are making it?
No, I don't think so, because, and some people have made the argument that somehow consumers are responsible for this. No, I don't accept that. If we have ownership over that material that we can recover, we're in a better position as businesses to reutilize that material.
Recovering and reusing the plastic is more important, Coyne says, than efforts to ban it.
The volume of material that we are recovering from the marketplace is still so low that I don't know whether or not a ban on any single-use plastics is going to have a material impact on that.
How would it not? Doesn't that mean that a significant amount just isn't going out into the environment in the first place?
I don't know what proportion of the overall plastics that is.
Well, it's about 40% by global estimates.
No, I don't think it's that high at all. I don't think it depends how you, well, it depends how you define single-use plastics.
How do you define single-use plastics?
Single-use plastics are things like plastic bags and straws, which are the two most common examples, which are only available for use one time. But there are those who will argue that a plastic bag is not a single-use product. Yes, you bring it home from the grocery store, but you may use it 3 or 4 times in the home.
But industrial ecologist Roland Geyer says reusing and recycling won't fix the problem, especially when 91% of the world's plastic currently goes unrecycled.
The only plastic that does not need to be disposed of is plastic that was never made.
We are going to stop it there. I think that was a perfect place to stop given the rest of our topic. I do want to just give a shout out to Seattle from there, and it is always exciting to sort of see my hometown sort of leading the way on some of this. So Connie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So is everybody depressed? I think there's a lot to be concerned about, and I was trying to figure out, okay, we've watched this and now what do we do? I started researching different approaches. I mean, last year we were going to focus on the plastic bags, and I even got a whole bunch of those orange bags the Department of Sanitation is sharing. So if anybody wants to stop by my house, I've got plenty of bags. But we've kind of gone past that stage. So I started looking and I found something I thought was hopeful, and it's called the extended producer responsibility. And what that does is it would boost recycling, curb waste, and save tax dollars by shifting the end of life, so the end of a project or a piece of plastic or whatever, for packaging and paper products from local governments who spend money or don't have the money now to spend on recycling to corporate producers. So I thought, well, okay, now that's something to check out. So I also learned at the same time that Albany is actually working on this exact concept. And one of the co-sponsors of a bill to address extended producer responsibility is Senator Brian Kavanaugh. And he agreed to speak to us tonight about the bill at Albany. Unfortunately, as happens with senators, his schedule changed. He's on a train. He may try to join us. But in the meanwhile, we have one of his able staff people, Lizzie Lee, who I did see came into the program. So we will have her speak about that. And then we're going to go on to Tom Outerbridge, who is been highly recommended in the field. I check it around with different groups and they say, oh, talk to Tom. He's the one that knows what's going on. So I just wanted a little bit of a background on Brian Cavanaugh, though. I was trying to find a representative that would cover where the parish is. And he actually covers in the Senate, it's District 26. It's Brooklyn Heights, Carroll Gardens, Cobble Hill, the Columbia Waterfront, Dumbo, downtown Brooklyn, Fulton Ferry, Greenpoint, the Navy Yard, Vinegar Hill, Williamsburg, and Lower Manhattan. And he's been in the Senate since 2017, and before that, 6 terms in the Assembly. So he works on affordable housing, preventing gun violence, protecting the environment, advancing economic and social justice. So I thought, well, he's our kind of guy. That's all our issues. And he has been a leader in the environmental area there. He's on the environmental committee, and he was co-sponsor of the 2019 Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which mandates huge cuts in climate pollution, investment in clean renewable energy sources, and creation of green jobs. And then Tom Outerbridge, who has been in the field of recycling and composting since the 1980s. For the last 15 years, he's been the general manager of Sims Municipal Recycling, headquartered in Sunset Park. They process and market commingled curbside recyclables. And he's responsible, these are the last numbers I could find, Tom, for 750 tons per year of recyclables produced by 11 million people. So he may even update those numbers. Before that, he actually was at the Department of Sanitation and head of their compost and recycling program. So first, oh, and actually, just as I was reading about this bill, which we'll have Lizzie get into, one of the quotes which just really stood out to me that actually Tom said, extended producer responsibility bill is the single largest action New York State can take to shore up public recycling programs. And it will firmly place New York as the leader in the US of progressive recycling legislation. So that sounds promising to me. So Lizzie, you're still there?
I'm still here. Thank you so much, Constance.
Great, thanks.
Great. And with your research, I don't know why I'm here, but no, thank you so much for having me. And first, I'm very sorry, but Senator Cavanaugh sends its sincerest apologies. He had every intention of being here, and he was actually very excited that you guys were holding conversations in the community. But you know, with last-minute budget negotiations, it's usual at this time of year. So thank you again, and I hope to be an effective vessel to communicate Senator's support for EPR. And for anyone you know, wanting to Google this really quickly, the Senate bill in question is S1185. It's sponsored by Senator Kaminsky, who is the chair of the Environmental Conservation Committee. And basically, as Constance said, it's to create an EPR program, an extended producer responsibility program for paper and packaging products. And with the Assembly version, it's also A5801 carried by Assemblymember Engelbright, and I'm sure you are all keen on updates of where the bill's status stands. Passed the ENCON committee in the Senate on February 2nd, I believe, and we're really fighting hard to have this included in the budget. You know, just to lay out kind of what this bill is supposed to do on the ground. I'll start with the problem that we're facing, which I know that, you know, I'm preaching to the choir here, but, you know, the United States and New York State has a huge waste problem. And we nationally generate around, you know, 290 million tons of solid waste annually. And a lot of that waste, 30% of which is going from packaging and paper products, which is a substantial amount. And in New York in particular, we have a very, very poor recycling track record. And we recycle less than, you know, a quarter of the solid waste, leaving a vast majority of them to sit in landfills. And because packaging waste makes an incredible an increasing share of the curbside waste stream due to the growth in, you know, things like e-commerce. We're seeing a lot of ramped up productions for cardboard and recycling. These materials have been really far more expensive for, you know, local governments due to the various kinds of international restrictions, as the documentary also depicted so incredibly effectively, as well as the plummeting prices in the recycling market, both, you know, nationally as well as globally. So this bill would seek to immediately reverse this trend, at least with packaging and paper products, by shifting the recycling responsibility of paper and packaging to from the consumer to the producer. So that's what's known otherwise as product stewardship. And that's with the goal to minimize both environmental and social impacts, but also in hopes to minimize health and safety concerns, as we know that a lot of these products are created with a lot of toxins. There's some byproducts in which is not great for our health as well as our environment. And the producer of the product will have the greatest ability to minimize these adverse impacts to begin with, because they're the ones creating it. So this bill is really going to, on the feet, going to make sure that we incentivize these producers to really take note of how they are manufacturing these items and put that liability on them. So I don't want to go into too much of a ramble here, but this basically, in summary, the packaging EPR bill is going to require them to fund municipal curbside collection and recycling programs, or provide their own curbside collection and recycling programs, set minimum recycled content requirements, incentivize producers to create less packaging waste in the first place, and also provide a method of transparency as well as accountability with the structure of the Producer Responsibility Advisory Board, in which we hope is a process that we can also acquire a lot of community input, so that this is truly a grassroots effort, as well as a goodwill, good faith way to regulate these producers, to really have a collaborative, closed loop, circular economy. And I'm sure, John, I hail from the land of the Rainy City as well. So yes, exactly. New York State has a lot to go to extend our ambitious goals as we set in the CLCPA, and this doesn't stop here, but we're really hopeful that this is going to be included in this year's budget. And we're pushing for EPR. Senator Kavanaugh actually has another bill for carpet stewardship, so it's carpet EPR. If you are interested, it's Senate Bill S5027, and he's had a carpet stewardship bill from 2007, I think, when he was in the assembly. So he's been a long time staunch supporter of this. If there's anything else, I'm seeing a couple. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for putting the URLs in the comments. But if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I'm sure, Tom, as you the expert of all things recycling, I'm sure you have a lot to add as well.
And so I just, I know there was an A, so it's been amended once, and then it was voted out of the committee, but then I saw that yesterday there was a B after it. So there's been another amendment, right?
Yes, I believe so. On March 10th, there was another amendment. And
I'd heard that the assembly hasn't actually voted theirs out of the committee yet. So, if that, by amending it now, does that mean that the two are coming together, or, because I guess those two different bills?
Yep, they are different bills in separate houses. So even if the assembly does not vote on it, there are ways in which we can pass a one-house budget so that it is included in the Senate side. I haven't spoken recently with Kaminsky or Engelbright's office in regards to this, and I don't actually see this on the committee calendar, but it's something that, at least on the Senate side, there's a lot of champions around this, and we're really hoping to get that included on our one house bill.
Does it have to happen during the budget, or could it happen afterwards?
So in a lot of what are the stipulations as pursuant to the bill language, there's a lot in there that are fiscal in nature. So the best way to do so is to have that included in the budget. The governor also included EPR language in the budget last year, and that's been something on our radar. That did not manifest this year because of COVID reasons, I'm sure, but this is a priority for individual senators, and I'm sure we're all going to push.
Good. Well, we'll have a more question and answer afterwards, but let's go to Tom, who's going to kind of, he's he can describe what he does at Sims Municipal Recycling, but from his perspective and having been in the field for long, how does he think this is going to actually work? And, you know, why is it a good idea, I guess? So, Tom?
Oh, hi, thank you, Connie. And I'm not an expert in how legislation moves through Albany, but I do understand. Well, by the way, Lizzie, to your boss there and the senators who are pushing this. I think that there is probably the bigger need for the push is on the assembly side, from the more so than the Senate, from what I understand. Yeah, so look, that was a totally sobering video, and after watching that, this is not going to address the problem at the scale at which it exists in the world, and that's just. But it's going to take a lot of little pieces, but was a lot of little steps, and what I said about this being the most significant sort of advancement for public sector recycling programs totally stands in my mind for New York State. Been doing this for more than 30 years and was around at the beginning of curbside recycling, and it's a fundamental shift in the economic burden for providing this service to the public from taxpayers to the companies that put these products into the marketplace. And so there's two big pieces to it. The first one being that this economic shift, so that New York City, when I started working at the Department of Sanitation, every other year was a political football. If the budget was tight, they'd cut recycling, or the mayor would cut recycling, and then the city council would put it back. The mayor cut it, or they'd go from weekly to bi-weekly, and it was a ping pong ball that went back and forth depending on the budget. And this takes that financial uncertainty out of the public sector. Department of Sanitation trying to provide a reliable service that ultimately, man, it is a public service, and the video piece showed, the dependence that the industry had developed on China as the consumer. When China shut its doors, the markets collapsed. Therefore, the economics of recycling collapsed, and I think it's very difficult to have this public sector service tied to global commodities, the global commodity market over which New York City has no control. So the first big sort of motivation and benefit of these extended producer responsibility laws is, in this case, there's lots of different EPR laws and how they're structured, is to shift that financial burden. And the second is, I think as Lizzie mentioned, there's incentives built in there for them to also not just pay the price, but to be rewarded for recycled content, to be rewarded for recyclability, to be rewarded or required to minimize or reduce any sort of toxicity, rewarded for reusability and durability. Is it perfect? Is it going to change sort of the packaging stream overnight? Probably not. I think that there'll be some brands that pay the higher fee because they like the way the product looks, and but there's an increase. The big brands feel this pressure, right? They all have sustainability goals and objectives and personnel, and this just adds a sort of a legislative and financial set of incentives behind those sort of stated targets. How it works, just background, I run the Sims Municipal Recycling, and we handle 100% of the curbside metal, glass, and plastic in New York City. So any of you who recycle your metal, glass, and plastic, that comes to us, and about half of the paper. We also handle some recyclables from Long Island and a number of New Jersey municipalities, and some down in Florida as well. I think you said 700 tons. I think it's more like 700,000 tons of material that flows through our facilities. And that video is very much about plastics. Plastics are very much in the public eye because of the horrible, ocean plastics and these kind of, the showing up in food and animal, stomachs and things like that. But this bill is much more than plastics. It's glass, which is hugely problematic from a recycling standpoint, just the economics of it. So this provides support for that. The paper markets are very challenged. They're coming back, but because China was the world's consumer of recycled fiber, So I think Lucy said 35, I think it's almost 40%, somewhere between 35 and 40% of the entire residential waste stream in New York City would be covered by this this particular piece of EPR legislation. And then organics represent another huge chunk, which are not covered by this, but that's why I say it's sort of the impact of it, or the significance of it is on the sort of order of magnitude that it is in my career. And I do this, I sort of participated in sort of the advocacy for this legislation, not just in my role as the public or sort of private partner to the public program in New York City, the Department of Sanitation, but also with the New York Product Stewardship Council, which is basically an organization throughout New York State, representatives throughout New York State sort of advocating. There was the e-waste EPR law, the paint law that just passed, carpet that's being considered, and it's primarily, not exclusively, but primarily public sector employees who are responsible for management of the waste stream and recycling programs, whether it's Onondaga County, Niagara County, members from Long Island. So sort of that's sort of the auspices, if you will, under which I've been really engaged in this particular piece of legislation.
Perfect. I mean, in a layman's point of view, I think about the vitamins I get that come in a big box, and then another box, and then a container this size, and then you really only need it this big. You know, I mean, hopefully all that gets kind of looked at it in a more serious way, right?
Right. I mean, theoretically, brands have a motivation to reduce their packaging because they spend money on it, but this just adds a direct financial incentive. And if they don't do it, then the city will be reimbursed for doing it for them or managing it properly for them. And the other thing about it is, again, it's not going to make the problem go away, but the video talked about the challenge in achieving high recycling rates. The city will be reimbursed for the cost of its recycling program. So if they can get a detergent bottle into the recycling program, or a cardboard box, or a pickle jar, they will have that financial support. If that pickle jar ends up in the garbage to be sent to a landfill, they get no support. So the city ends up with a tremendous financial incentive to divert material. If they already have certain political objectives and so forth, but it's another tremendous financial incentive for the city to have very robust education programs, enforcement programs, whatever it is that they can do, the public space recycling programs, with the things that they can do to get that recycling rate up to where it could be.
Great. We're going to turn over to Liz for a little Q&A, or if there's been any questions. Well, I see there's probably some questions in the chat. Just for a couple of minutes, if you go look at Sims Municipal Recycling website, is fantastic. And you want to just describe what you've got, for public education? I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, so when we got into this, Sims is a big global scrap metal and electronics recycler, but in New York, a very sort of strong roots and presence in New York. And when actually was Bloomberg first cut the recycling program after 9/11, a number of environmental organizations approached Hugo News, Sims at the time, said, you should get into this recycling business. It's being managed by waste management companies. They are not making the investment. They're overcharging the city. And the company was intrigued by that. Basically, we're a recycling company. We do not own landfills. It's all about investment in sorting technology and optimizing the quality of the material to get the value out of it. They won a short-term contract. Then they hired me the city put out a long-term contract, which they hired me to to put the proposal together for. We were selected, and the significance of that is that with a 20-year contract, the company could go out and spend tens of millions of dollars building the infrastructure. Very difficult to do on a short-term contract where you don't know if you're going to have the material. in a couple of years, but with that contract and accompanying that contract, we identified with the city a piece of property in Sunset Park, 11-acre pier, and that lease is sort of from EDC is a companion to the contract with the Department of Sanitation, and we built the principal processing facility. We handle about 2/3 of all of New York City's material on that site. And part of what we wanted to do was say, okay, this is a piece of public infrastructure effectively, and hired an architect to make it something that the community and others could be happy to have on the waterfront, and committed to having an education program there. We built an education center, which up until COVID was booked basically year round for school groups and adult groups. We do still run virtual tours. I have a young woman who actually runs that education program, and I'm happy to send you her contact. She runs virtual tours for the time being, that are very popular with public school groups and other school groups, but also a lot of adult groups come through, city planners, architects groups. We run a lot of educational programs, frankly, for brands who send their designers through who have never been to a recycling facility in the world, in their life rather, and sort of to say, okay, this is what really happens with your package, and if you want it to be recyclable, here are the things that are going to allow us to capture it, and here are the things that are going to prevent that from happening. So I'm very happy to send you after this, Connie, the contact for my education coordinator. Anyone who wants to go on a virtual tour, and at some point, hopefully before not too long, we open back up. We used to participate in Open House New York, so we have scheduled tours, but also try to have some just open days when anyone who happens to wander in can do that. And we built it there's a education center with a lot of sort of interactive exhibits and so forth, but also a viewing area to actually see the equipment operating and see what your stuff looks like in a big pile.
No, I really learned a lot by watching some of those videos. That's great. So Liz, you want to take it from here?
No, yeah,
Sure.
and Tom, oh, there's another Liz. My bad. I thought you were referring to me.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead, Liz.
I'm Lizzie only to family and very close friends. So I think we just want to thank you so much for that all the wonderful details and backgrounds and background information, because I mean, we sit in our meetings and we talk like, what could we be doing? Where should our energies be focused? What's the most sort of fruitful terrain for us to, sort of tread on to actually inspire change? And there is this sort of concern, as individuals, like what behaviors can we sort of manage, but it's very interesting to sort of push the burden up the supply chain so that we're not it can be a very significant struggle for us as individuals, and also as the leader of a family where the garbage we produce is just frightening. So we have a few questions from the chat. Ellen asks, why is plastic waste sent to other countries? And do we pay them to take the plastic waste? Like, what is the sort of the model there, the distribution model?
Well, I mean, I'll say in when things are working properly, when people are acting as they should, it is a commodity, just like recycled paper. So if you look at the Chinese paper mills, I mean, China is a massive producer, consumer of paper. They don't have a lot of forests. When they built their paper mills, they designed them to be fed with recycled paper rather than virgin pulp. And that's a good thing, right? I mean, if they were not being fed with recycled paper, they're going to be chopping down forests to make their, newspapers and toilet paper and cardboard boxes. Same with steel, recycled steel. We move steel. We sell steel to steel mills in Turkey, and otherwise they're going to be importing iron ore, right? And same with aluminum. So they're sort of these global commodities. Plastics theoretically would fall into that category. I think where there's been a lot of problems is there are a lot of bad actors out there. There are a lot of people who would basically use and you see this, there's the basal action bans are sort of going to undeveloped countries who are willing to take material and don't have in the control so that, you know, the residuals are being, you know, dumped down the riverbank or burned or using child labor to sort. There were those types of activities that were occurring, but there was enough material in there of value for them to pay you a penny a pound for it. But coupled with that material of value in that bale of material, there's a lot of trash that just gets disposed of inappropriately. And I think there was enough of that activity happening, and it caught enough press that that's what led to the Chinese ban on imports. And so unfortunately, I think some legitimate utilization of recycled fiber in paper mills. We have a paper mill in Staten Island in New York, right? That's 100% fed off of recycled paper. It's a good thing. So some of that legitimate activity got thrown out along with the bad actors, but that's why it moves. It's sort of, in particular, if you're on, we haven't sold plastics to China for many, or any export for many, many years, because we have the ability to sort our plastics into resin grades for which there are domestic markets. We don't sell mixed plastics. And there are quite robust domestic markets, but part of it also has to do with geography, particularly if you're on the West Coast, you're much closer to the Asian market. And so a lot of it is transportation and economics, but that's a general idea. Theoretically, in a perfect world, you would be only shipping commodities, just like we ship corn somewhere, or automobiles, or import phones. You would be shipping materials to places where they're best utilized. It's just that, you know, there's been enough bad actors out there, or poorer countries that simply don't have the enforcement mechanisms in place, or they're driven to this activity, that you have these side effects.
Thanks for that. So Rosa Waldron asks, she has a two-part question. How will the city and state know which manufacturer produced the packaging that's picked up at the curb? In other words, how will the EPR be enforced if it is enacted?
No, that's a great question. Thank you, Rosa. And this is going to be on the auspices of DEC. The enforcement mechanism is going to be with DEC, as well as the consultation of the advisory board in which the bill will promulgate. You know, there's going to be an extensive language in the bill about auditing and education and outreach to the consumers that are mandated to implement this into their facilities and their production. And, you know, this, in addition, it's going to require an annual report. So, you know, with the added incentive to do so, there will be civil penalties that could be imposed on violations of this law. So, you know, this is a tightly regulated, hopefully that will be on the ground, and, you know, something that will also provide some room for community input as well with the consultation process.
But I would also say that it's based on what they sell in New York. So let's say Unilever sells, I'm making up a number, however many thousands of pounds of plastic in New York, that will be tied to their financial obligation. And so what the New York City won't be reimbursed by material type. They will say, we recycled, you know, 30,000 tons a month of this stuff. 80% of that was covered by this packaging law. Therefore, here's the cost, and the producers will allocate amongst them whether you have a high recycling rate for a Unilever product or a Pepsi product or a Procter & Gamble product is not going to change that. Basically, it's the bill the city has that is conveyed to the producers, and the producers will fund that cost based on the amount of material they sell into the state. That makes sense.
So it's interesting to think about how will resident sorting and recycling change? Is there any sort of shift in behavior that we should anticipate?
There's no shift in behavior for the homeowner, other than hopefully subtle things that are very beneficial, but that don't require them to, sort of, if you can buy a yogurt cup today, which is a number 6 polystyrene, a number 5 polypropylene, number 2 HDPE. 2 of those are recyclable. 1 is trash. And so what we'll do is the homeowner is not going to be trying to read, and trying to figure it out. Basically, the incentive, the financial incentive will be for every yogurt manufacturer to put it in either a 2 or a 5. Otherwise, they will pay a higher fee for their package. So and it's not going to happen overnight, but the end game is that every product that is on the shelf is 100% recyclable and has recycled content in it.
Interesting. Great. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. We have Chris has a question. Are there penalties for not recycling for residences, co-ops, and condos in New York or in other states? Does this work? Meaning, I assume, does this inspire better recycling practices?
There are penalties in New York. It's mandatory in New York. I can't speak for every jurisdiction. It's been mandatory, I think, frankly, since 1989. And I would defer to somebody else of how well that enforcement works. Is what's better, the carrot or the stick? And I think sometimes the enforcement is on the building. Not a lot of people are in multifamily units, right? So they don't see the penalty directly. So there are penalties on the books, whether or not the tickets are written and how consistently. I don't know the numbers on that.
Gotcha. Julie has an interesting question. Is it true that if you put an item in recycling, like a type of plastic that's not actually recyclable, that the whole group of items in that bag are pitched and not recycled? This is one of my big fears too, actually, Julie.
No, we set that. That's sort of our fundamental role in the whole process, is sorting it out. So we have to sort not just metal from glass, from plastic, from paper, but also plastic by resin type. There are certain things in there that will contaminate material. We don't want a lot of food waste in there, or garden hoses and things like that come rope and extension cords, but yet 2 different resin types. Fortunately, the technology's come a long way. We sort that automatically with optical sorters, so we don't have to have human beings trying to look at the bottom of the container and look for a number. So that's, we'd rather not have it because it will end up as trash and we pay to dispose of it as in a landfill, but it won't prevent us from recovering the other material.
Got it. Ellen has another question. There are so many products that are packaged in materials other than plastic containers, such as detergent wafers and shampoo cakes. Much of these are obtained on the internet only, but why aren't they in stores? Why haven't these sort of taken hold as consumer products? It's a good question.
That I don't know.
I mean, that may be a business model question in terms of distribution and actual quality, in terms of delivering, the outcomes that are promised. But it is interesting because I notice a lot of moms in Brooklyn, which tend to be sort of eco-centered, or say they are, shampoo that is in a bar has become very popular. So they eliminate the sort of pretty tough plastic containers that go right into the garbage. John, you've raised your hand. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, no, it was more just, I think, Tom, you were hinting at it a little bit at like the different levels of resin. I think it's good to remind people of what you're actually talking about are actually the different numbers on the plastic. I think I'll tell you more about my own experience, but I think that's a question or something I think is always helpful for people to understand, that not all of those numbers are recyclable. And in fact, there's just a few that are really important.
Right. It's been a big bone of contention between the recycling industry and the chemistry council that came up with that they basically put the recycling logo around each number. And yeah, and so we actually try to stay away from the numbers, you know, because it's just, one, you're asking people to look at a number and sometimes it's hard to see, but they do represent particular resin categories, some of which have markets and some of which do not.
Should we go to Lizzie, or are you anything else? Or?
No, yeah, I just wanted to add, I've been learning from Tom right now too. So I wanted to add to Christine's question, you know, this is fundamentally in order to place more liability on the people that actually manufacture these items and sell them in New York State. And, you know, in doing so, we're going to structure it in a way that includes these incentives to reward producers, as Tom was saying, to, you know, also increase the recyclability of their products. They're going to be incentivized to do so and remove the toxins in their packaging that would otherwise create a huge harm to communities. In other contexts, you know, there's EPR that has been successfully implemented in Canada, as well as in various places in Europe. You know, this is, as Tom was saying, it's not going to be the solution, the silver bullet, but we're really hoping that this is going to be something that we are going to implement widely enough so that it makes a difference.
So Liz, maybe you could go into, we'd like to help the senator actually get this bill passed. So Liz, you want to go into that a minute?
That would be perfect. I don't know if everyone here is a constituent of SD 26, but I'm assuming you have people from everywhere. Contact your local state senator as well as your assembly member. You know, if you need help in doing so, you can always just Google "find my state senator," "find my state assemblyman," and there's always going to be some contacts there. You know, we're really hoping, really hoping in the next couple of days, we're going to pursue with the budget negotiation process with the executive branch. So we're really hoping that this is going to come out in our favor. You know, other things down the pipeline is to make sure that we are fully funding the Environmental Bond Act. That's something that we're, the $3 billion that we had passed in the legislature last year, but due to COVID, we did provide a directive to the executive branch saying that, you know, you could pull this if you needed to. And you know, of course, situation is that we very much so needed to, but we're really hoping that's going to be in the pipeline in the very, very recent future. And exactly, posting the bill numbers is very, very important, even if, you know, a lot of the office is currently having voicemail messages, you know, emailing is very effective. When you do these, you can provide them with the EPR bill S1185B. And I just put that in the chat right there. I think Liz also provided that in the prior messages as well. And of course, just if you guys have any other ideas, and you know, as Tom, he's an expert in the community, and you know, we really value input from our community members. I would suggest engage your local electeds.
Great. Well, we did do some research of an easy way to send the letter. So Liz, do you want to describe that?
Or I think it was.
Oh, you're going to, okay.
It was my part of the agenda, Connie.
Okay.
So I'm going to give actually a couple of things. There's actually an action that all of us can take tonight. It's a link and it's a web form. So, you know, for better or for worse. And Lizzie, you can tell us, is this something that if you get a series of electronic letters from your constituents, do you pay attention to them?
Of course, especially more in numbers, we very much so appreciate.
So this allows you to send a letter to basically encouraging the passage of this bill. So please do this. I think it's actually specifically going to the chairs of.
No, it's your appointed, whoever you.
Okay, so it's actually your own committee. So it's a way of supporting us. That's something we can all do tonight. All you have to do is click on the link I just shared, and it takes about 2 minutes to do that. So please do that and do that. Pass it on to friends. And then I'll share the link to the plastics problem video, which it has about 15 more minutes if you'd like to watch it. It actually gets into some other things that other parts of the industry, like the bottling industry, is actually trying to really make all of their packaging really high quality recyclable, but then also really trying to up the capture of it. Still, you know, it'd be great if we could reduce it. I actually started my first job when I was in high school was with the Washington State Department of Ecology, and I helped design a recycling program for my high school, which that was a long time ago. We're just not going to say how long ago it was. But at a part of that is there's the slogan reduce, reuse, recycle is in that order for a specific reason. If we don't produce it, you're reducing the amount of trash there is. Then as she said, you know, use what we can and then recycle the rest. And I always think it's really important to remind myself that if I don't need the packaging, I don't need it. And I think it's a good way of actually kind of overall reducing our work. I want to thank you, Tom. Thank you, Lizzie, for being here tonight. And thank you all for joining. This is the second event that we've had in like a few weeks that have actually had very specific policy goals that we can, you know, push in Albany, which is great. There's a healthcare one that we had a couple weeks ago that is actually, you can watch that video as well of this session. In next month, there are actually going to be another talk. It'll be about climate change and mostly about immigration, but climate change is the focus. It's Michael Gerard. He's the head of the Sabin Center at Columbia Law. He's going to do a presentation and talk about that. He actually presented after the Pope's encyclical on sort of climate change and its impact on immigration in particular and refugee status. So we're excited about that. It's April 20th. Stay tuned. We've got all kinds of good, exciting things. And again, thank you guys. We really appreciate you being here. It means
one more thing. So Liz Baggett also did a very good list of resources for everybody. So Liz, you want to mention that? You're on mute.
I'm telling, it's so unlike me to be talking to myself. So I attached the file to the link.
Okay,
I linked the file to the chat, and it's sort of a summary. It has the URL and also other information about the bill if you want to check it out, and the action items that John described. We're also going to send it to everyone who registered because we have your email address, so we'll send it out. And take action. Now's the time.
Right. So yeah. So I think we'll leave this open for a bit if you want to just pull it up and do it right now. So I did it and it works. But you just you know, by giving your address, they then kind of fill in most of it. But there's a little box, and if you want to edit anything in the little box,
I'll show you. This is what it looks like when you click on it.
Yeah. So you fill that all, and then they figure out what district you're in and all that. So it's very.
That's awesome. Will you also, because you have my email, kind of just send that as something that I can just forward that to others?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That'd be great.
This was the easiest one I could find. There's, you know, a few people have this up on their website, but this one is a good one.
It's great.
So then, yeah, okay.
I'm doing it. I'm showing you how quickly you can do this.
Right.
Assuming I can type. Yes, I'm sure. Why not?
See, and then that you don't even have to fill that in because you've got.
It does it on.
So.
Done.
So, and then you'll get a nice response. See, right already. There you go.
Fantastic.
Deliver. I mean, you want. Oh yeah, the Cuomo one is on top. Yeah. So.
Yep. Easy. That took less than 2 minutes.
Yes. So you'll leave it on here for 5 minutes, right? So.
Exactly. Yeah. So thank you, and continue chatting and all. And yeah. And Lizzie, please keep us informed too. Connie can communicate to her if there's things that you need specifically, or like you need us to like call into somebody. We're happy to put the pressure on people as much as we can, given that we're small parish in downtown Brooklyn.
a real big mailing list, so we can send it out. And so.
That's fantastic. I wish everyone was as active and engaged as you all are. I just put my email down in the chat. I feel comfortable enough to do that with all 24 of you here. If you need anything from our office, feel free to contact me as well. You know, we're in close communication with other colleagues in other offices as well. So if you need a referral, please feel free to just email me. I check it more than my texts, which is very bad for my life, but very good for work productivity. So you'll definitely get a response soon.
Great.
If you get this passed, I will organize a custom tour for you in Brooklyn, I promise. So.
I'm going to hold you to that. I have a lot of my coworkers who will be very enthused to join me. That'd be great.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, everybody.
Let's go. Did Liz leave? All right, I'm stopping the recording.
Right, we don't need that.
We're good.